want to do this middle box that says show active speaker, because then the recording will, I think, only show the active speaker, which is what we want.
The only thing is, so see when I'm looking at where are you guys seeing that? Because I'm looking at the 3 dots above my name, and when I click on it, I can't see active speaker.
Hover over, there's like a small dot, a big dot, and then 2 dots?
They look like cell phone bars or battery bars.
Yeah. At the top of
next to the mute, it says mute.
No, to the left and up.
Yeah, above the whole set of boxes.
Oh, okay, hold on.
Hover over those things.
So speaker view, so it says speaker view or gallery view?
Go downstairs.
Yeah, speaker view, that's what we want. I don't have that choice, but.
So speaker view, I'll just make sure it's clicked on that for the video.
Yeah, if you do that right now, what happens?
So when I do that, all I see is you.
Okay, so I see you guys still, but that'll be good for recording. I think that's, I'm learning as I go here. Is it already recording?
Yeah, so I've started, hold on. Yeah, pause, stop recording.
So maybe stop and then start again when we start, so we don't have all this at the beginning of the thing.
And when I get going. All right, hi everyone. I'm Christina Kother with the Weston Garden Club and the Weston Pollinator Pathway Steering Committee. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on with the Weston Pollinator Pathway, and then I will introduce our speaker for the evening, Louise Washer. If you have any questions, will you please type them into the little chat box, and when we get to the end, we'll go through the questions and provide answers. And we will also be recording, so we'll share and you can rewatch later or share with friends. This is one of 2 events we're having this week in honor of Pollinator Week, and the second is on the 25th, which I think is Thursday, and it's Soundscape Ecology. So please check that out as well if you're interested. Let's see. Okay, the Weston Pollinator Pathway. We are a volunteer-led steering committee that's largely comprised of members of our Weston Garden Club. We are supported by many local organizations, as you can see here, everything from the Norwalk River Watershed Association to the Aspetuck Land Trust to Dirt Road Farm, Red Bee Honey, lots of great organizations. And this is us last year at the Memorial Day Parade in Weston. We have many existing pollinator pathway gardens in town, so go for a drive and check out the circle at the middle school. The circle at the elementary school is just got a big overhaul and it's just starting to bloom. The pollinator garden around the perimeter of the community garden at the Shot is also in full bloom right now and very gorgeous. So go check those out. And we have a lot of new things we're doing in 2020. We raised over $8,000 for new gardens and new plants, thanks to Sustainable Connecticut for their matching grant fund and the Global Preservation Society for their generous grant. We are expanding the Leshat pollinator gardens. We're also planting new things at Hurlbut in the middle school. We have a new native garden going in front of the Onion Barn, so look for that there. It's going to be really exciting, as well as over by the Jarvis Military Academy. I think of it more as the Parks and Rec building, but over there we have a lot of stuff we're doing over there. So a lot of exciting new stuff happening in 2020. This past year, we added over 100 households to the Weston Pollinator Pathway. So that's 200 acres of safe and healthy pollinator habitat, which is really exciting. If you're interested in joining and you're not already a member, please email us at westonpollinatorpathway@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Facebook at Weston Pollinator Pathway, or on Instagram and ask questions or just get a feel for what we're up to. You can also come and volunteer just for fun. So now I'd like to introduce Louise Washer, who has, she has the green arrows pointing to her here. because she's made it all possible. Louise Washer is the president of the Norwalk River Watershed Association. Not many people realize this, but the town of Weston falls within the Norwalk River watershed. Louise has served on the NRWA board since 2010 and became president in 2016. She got involved in NRWA after volunteering for the River Study Program at Cider Mill School in Wilton when her children were students there. Louise helped create and serves on the steering committee of the Pollinator Pathway, which now connects over 100 towns in Connecticut, New York, and most recently, Pennsylvania. Louise also serves on the Norwalk Mayor's Water Quality Committee and the steering committee for the Hudson to Housatonic Conservation Partnership, H2H. She graduated from Smith College and has worked in magazine publishing in New York. Thank you, Louise. And again, just a reminder, if you have any questions for Louise as she goes through her presentation, to please type them into the chat box and she will answer at the end.
Okay. Let me share my screen here. And here we go. And you guys, Christina, tell me if you can, oh, hold on, I still need to share. Let's see. Oops, hold on.
Almost there.
Here we go. Can you see that?
Yes, yes.
Got it? So hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Can you guys see me? Is everything in working order here? I hope so. Thank you for joining tonight, and thank you for your interest in the Pollinator Pathway. Such amazing things are happening in Weston. It's so exciting, and I'm so glad to be working with everybody in Weston. And tonight, I'm really going to talk about, since you guys have a Pollinator Pathway that's up and going, I'm going to talk about sort of how individuals can join, what it means to be part of the Pollinator Pathway. I think a lot of you are familiar with what the idea of what the pathway is. It's a goal of creating corridors, wildlife corridors, connecting public and private properties that provides pesticide-free native plant habitat and nutrition for pollinators. I love this picture because this house in the middle on the bottom picture is just such a great illustration of what it looks like to provide habitat that connects. I think maybe that's like a tree farm or something behind that house. And this is the goal, is just to provide those sorts of native plantings that support birds and pollinators and allow them to move in response to climate change and to find a mate or to find food or whatever reason they need to be able to migrate. Why do this? This is the bad news part. Everybody's probably seen a lot of these things in the newspaper. The statistics on monarchs, they're down, I think it's like actually 96.4% in the last 25 or so years. So they're on people's minds, as are bees. Colony collapse, we're all familiar with. And I think one of the most important studies was this German study that showed a 76% decline in all flying insects. It was set up in a place they've been monitoring these same open spaces for such a long time that it was just a good base for showing this decline that's happened, and it shows that the issue is global. But on the good side, the reason to be doing this is to celebrate and protect this amazing bee diversity that we have in Connecticut. When I first got involved with this, I sort of thought of honeybees as what bees are, when in fact our focus with the Pollinator Pathway includes honeybees, but also is to sort of try to raise awareness about the native bees in Connecticut. And there are 349 species, and this bumblebee is probably one that you're seeing now. So what are the threats to the pollinators? Loss and fragmentation of habitat, which you could see in that in the picture what that looks like in this picture in the center here. Pesticides and lawn chemicals are obviously toxic too. If they kill ticks, they kill everything, and this is a big problem for our area in Connecticut. Invasive plants, landscapes that lack native plants, and loss of plant diversity. Climate change, which is especially affects pollinators in terms of the time of bloom. So if we have very warmer, if it gets warmer earlier, plants might bloom before the pollinators that depend on them have emerged. And so the synchronization kind of gets off. That's one of the issues. And then light pollution is a big concern for our moth population. The story of the pollinator pathway, if you guys aren't, here I can turn myself on here, you guys can see me. The story of the pollinator pathway, if you're not familiar, it started about 3 years ago in Wilton, in the Norwalk River watershed. And I started working on it in Wilton, and then I thought, wow, it would be so great to do this in all the watershed towns, to connect the 7 watershed towns. So we started, I got land trusts and garden clubs and people like Sarah on board, and we just started doing it. And then people started calling and saying, we want to do it in our town too. And so it has turned into something that is now in, I think, 102 towns. We just got a couple of towns outside Philadelphia. So people are just ready for this idea, and it's working. The message is simple: rethink your lawn, which I'm going to go into these in the rest of the talk. Plant native plants and avoid pesticides. That's our basic mission with the pollinator pathway. So first I'll talk about lawns. Rethink your lawn. Mow less frequently, only every 2 or 3 weeks. There's actually a study that was done in Springfield, Massachusetts, I think, that showed that mowing every 2 weeks increased the number of, it increased the diversity of bees that were, and pollinators that were able to find flowers and things in the lawns of, I think it was 16 houses in Springfield. And mowing every 3 weeks increased the total population, but the diversity was down a little bit. And some of the thinking there was that the longer grass might have shaded out some of the flowers that the every 2 weeks mowing allowed. So things like that, really interesting way to rethink lawns. The other thing is the No Mow May that we were just talking about before we got started here. I was so glad to read about that in the Weston newsletter, and I did that at my house. Reduce the size of the lawn by adding shrubs and or pollinator garden, trees. Let part of your yard go natural and just see what grows. Avoid pesticides, especially 2,4-D, which is in a lot of the weed and feed products, and that is actually one of the ingredients that was in Agent Orange. So it's very toxic. It's known, it's linked to cancer in animals and things. So it's a particularly one to look out for. And the neonicotinoids, which we know are really especially harmful, to bees. Leave the leaves, test your soil to find out if you really need fertilizer. And if you do, use organic. And Sarah and I were just talking about our new electric lawnmowers that we're loving. So that's another way to rethink your lawn. So what the issue with lawns? There are a few issues. Everyone loves their lawn. I love my lawn, and it's not that you should get rid of your lawn, but it's just to recognize why they're causing problems. I mean, actually, I'm just going to show this next slide first. So there are 40 million acres of lawn in the United States. I think it's actually now 46 million. I saw a new number recently. You can see up here in Connecticut, we got lots of green up in our area. And it's just, the problem with that is that it's a monoculture. It offers very little habitat to any wildlife. It generally adds fertilizers and maybe pesticides to wetlands and streams. If you put those things down on your lawn, they end up in the water. And then the other thing, which I thought was so interesting, is that the root systems are so shallow. If you look at the turf grass in the far left corner of this picture, you can see that root system and how it's just so shallow, especially if you keep your grass very short. The root system doesn't have a chance to get any deeper than that. And the reason that matters is that when rain falls on the ground, it soaks in. It's the roots of the plants growing that clean it and take out the toxins and get it ready to return to our aquifer or wetlands or river. So the turf grass is really not much different from pavement in the sense of how much it can clean the water as it's coming down. You might detect a little bit of a water focus here because I work for the Watershed Association, so I came to the pollinator pathway thinking about water. That's how I got here. So another problem we're having actually right now, we're 4 weeks into what is looking like it may be a drought for us. If you look at your rivers and streams around where you live, you'll probably see that they are quite low now. In our area of Southwest Connecticut, these are Aquarian statistics, but 40% of the water we use is used outside. And in the summer now, especially when it's dry and hot, that number jumps to 70%. So we're watering our lawns and, our ornamentals that haven't adapted. Our non-native plants generally take more water than native plants because the native plants have evolved to survive in this climate. Turf grass is not native, and that's one of the reasons it does need a lot of water to stay green. This statistic, nationally, lawns suck up 9 billion gallons of water per day, is just alarming. So I think a lot of people don't make the connection between that it's a balance we're keeping. The water that we don't use on our lawns gets to stay in the rivers for the fish and other aquatic life. So at times like this, it's really important. In fact, I'm writing all these letters to the editor right now of the watershed towns to please let people know that it's important to use water conservatively right now. So this happened today. You'll notice the pesticide application sign down there has today's date on it. I was on a bike ride and I was thinking about this talk and how I was going to talk about avoiding pesticides. And one of the reasons that avoiding pesticides is a big part of the pollinator pathway message is that if you're going to plant plants that attract pollinators, you don't want to then spray pesticides. You don't want to create an ecological trap. So today, riding my bike through New Canaan, I saw an ecological trap. So I jumped off my bike and took this picture, and you can see so these people had just sprayed today. And they had also put in this catmint, which was humming with bumblebees. And I just thought, wow, that's the perfect example of what not to do. So instead of pesticides, spray yourself. We always say spray yourself instead of your yard. Always do the tick check if you've been in the woods or area and especially if it's, in the spring and it's wet outside. Like, it's so dry now, I don't think that there's as much of a tick problem. But landscape to repel ticks naturally, removing barberry is a good one. There's more information about all of this on the Pollinator Pathway website. It's pollinator-pathway.org, and there's tons of info on this. If you do feel that you need to use something to combat the ticks, we recommend tick boxes or MET52 fungus. And that MET52 is a new product that I don't know very much about, but it comes from fungus, and it supposedly does just affect ticks and not harm other pollinators. So that's kind of an exciting thing that actually I need to read more about. And the tick boxes, the mice go in and they just get a little dose of pesticide on their back, and then they go back into their hole, and it just kills the ticks on the mice. So it's not the tubes that have the cotton in them, because the mice take a little bit of the cotton with pesticides back to their holes. And then the problem with that is that bumblebees often use old rodent holes for their nests. And so if they come in and if there is this cotton with pesticides in there, it will hurt the bumblebees. So that's why the tick boxes are better. They don't use cotton. And plant native plants that attract beneficial insects. This is from my yard. This is a ladybug that was about to hopefully gobble all of those aphids off of my milkweed. And use organic fertilizers, as we talked about, as needed, testing to see if you need it. And another important thing that I always want to remind people is when you buy plants, first of all, ask for native plants. We want the world to know that there's a demand for native plants. And also ask if they are free of systemic pesticides, because sometimes nurseries will have plants that the seeds have been coated in pesticides to keep bugs from eating the plants when you first put them in. But that is a problem. Those systemic pesticides can stay in the plants for like 3 to 5 years in some cases, and they can be harmful to pollinators. So that's a good question to ask. This is pictures of some of the beneficial insects that you will have the joy of seeing, and you probably already do if you're not spraying pesticides. The aphid lion is there. He is attacking an aphid in the left corner. And this is like my favorite bug, the trash bug. The lacewing on the right is a beneficial insect that eats a lot of pests, garden pests. And in its larval stage, it collects trash. It collects bits of leaves and exoskeletons from other bugs. And one time I was in a kayak and I looked down at a cooler. You can see that picture is like the top of a gray cooler. And it looked like there was like a breadcrumb walking across the top of the cooler. And I was just like, what is this thing? So I kept it the whole way down the river. And then when I got home, I like carefully took it in and took pictures of it and looked it up. And it is the larval stage of the lacewing. So not only is it beneficial because it gets rid of pests, it's incredibly entertaining to watch these things walking around. And then plant native plants. This is where I love this talk that I get to talk about, not how to start a pollinator pathway, but like how to join. So I get to really talk about the plants. If you plant them, they will come. I wanted to start by mentioning containers. Not everybody has, if you live in an apartment or a smaller place, or if you want to do this for your town, these are actually the containers that are along Main Street in Ridgefield. And I'm about to, in the next 2 days, put the plant lists and some notes from the Ridgefield Pollinator Pathway on the website to let you know what worked and what didn't work. But they got these containers from Walpole, and they actually found that the perennials came back the next year. They put evergreens in the winter, and it's working. I say 3 or 4 towns are doing that, and it's also something people can do at their homes. So why native plants? Some of you may have already seen this. I just love this story so much that I always include it. It's the story of the 2 dogwoods, a case for natives. And this is the Cornus florida, which is our native dogwood in Connecticut. And it is, it blooms early, as you probably know, and it has evolved with the blue azure butterfly, which you'll see in the top right hand section of your screen. That's the butterfly that inspired the logo for the Pollinator Pathway. So it has a special place in our heart. And here's the caterpillar, which has kind of a line on its body. It looks like the branch of the tree. So these two, this plant and this butterfly, have really evolved together. Later in the season, birds and our birds eat the berries on the native tree. And so this is the other beautiful Japanese dogwood, the Cornus kusa, that I have in my yard. I have both in my yard, and I love it. It's gorgeous, but it doesn't host pollinators. It creates these cherry-looking things at the end of the season, and it turns out that those are food for this Japanese monkey. So I like to put him in, and I just feel like it's a great explanation for why it makes sense to include native plants in your landscape to feed wildlife. And Doug Ptolemy, who many of you might know, the author of Bringing Nature Home, he recommends a goal of having 70% native plants in your yard. So I have that goal now. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about trees. I love this treesforever.org uses the meadows in the sky image, and that's really what trees are. They are so important for pollinators, especially some of the early bloomings, the maples. They're really important for the moths and butterflies, especially. One thing that's been happening with the Pollinator Pathway in several towns is we've been getting calls from people who want us to come out and consult and look at their property. And what they're considering doing, or sometimes have already done, is cut down a lot of trees so that they can create a sunny spot for a meadow, because they want to support the pollinators. And it's true that wildflowers in a meadow are great. And we're going to talk about it in a minute, for supporting pollinators. But trees are equally, if not more important. So don't cut down your trees, and take a look at some of the lists that we have of the most important trees for supporting pollinators: the amelanchier, the serviceberry, maple, and I think I have another tree list coming up. Yeah, this is the one from Doug Ptolemy, who's sort of the godfather or grandfather or whatever you say, founder of this idea of your backyard being important habitat, and the fact that 86% of land east of the Mississippi is privately owned. I think it's 80% for the whole country. And so there's no longer enough room to just set aside wilderness and say, oh, the birds and the butterflies are going to live there, and my yard can just be, lawn and no bugs. We've gotten to a point where there isn't enough wilderness to sustain wildlife. So we get the joy of welcoming them into our yard. I mean, I started on this project, I don't know, I guess 3 years ago, and I feel completely differently about my yard. It feels like a mission now. And it's so thrilling to see nesting birds and to see, a hummingbird moth or whatever. I've got one monarch caterpillar that I saw yesterday, and just it's so fun. So anyway, here are the trees that Doug Ptolemy, the trees, and next to them is the number of Lepidoptera moth and butterfly that they support. So for the oak, it's 534 species, and the black cherry, which is a tree that a lot of times people feel is not attractive and looks not the most beautiful, but that is the second most important tree for pollinators. So don't cut down your black cherries. Native willows, birch. This is just a great list. So this is available also in Doug Ptolemy's books and also on our website. So this is the other thing before we talk about perennials. The shrubs for queens, when I first heard about them, it was in a talk by Dr. Kim Stoner, who is the state entomologist for Connecticut. And she was telling the story of how the bumblebees, their life cycle at the beginning of the spring. So the first thing that happens is the queens come out before they've laid the eggs for the colony. And they have to find nectar and pollen in order to feed themselves and to create the bee balls, and they got to find this food before they can lay their eggs. So the importance of early blooming plants and shrubs, especially for us, a lot of those are shrubs. There was an English study that showed that having a succession of bloom of perennial plants, which is important for bumblebees, didn't increase population unless it was accompanied by these early blooming shrubs. So if you had early blooming shrubs and a source of nectar and pollen through the summer, that's when they saw increases in the numbers of bumblebees surviving. So it's a great list. This is from a Massachusetts study: rhododendron, American pussy willow, the dogwood. So this is understory trees, and winterberry. So those are all great things to support our queens. These are just some that I love. The serviceberry on the left, early bloomer, important understory tree, and the spice bush, which is a specialty plant, or the spice bush swallowtail butterfly is a specialist with this plant, and it's sort of our native forsythia. It's a lot more delicate than forsythia, but I've fallen in love with it, and I've been trying to put it in my yard, and I'm waiting for the butterflies to come. And then this is a picture of a blossom on winterberry from my yard, and that I put it on there because I love that little guy. He is a syrphid, which is a fly that is has evolved to look like a bee. So I don't know if that protects him. Maybe other creatures think he could sting or something, but he's just beautiful, I think. This is another picture of a syrphid. So I'm going to talk about wildflowers a little bit now, and I just love this. That shows you how tiny that fly is, because this is Ohio spiderwort. If you're familiar with it, it's the second one on this list from Kim Stoner of what to plant to create what I was saying, a succession of bloom, a source of nectar and pollen through the season, through the summer, or through the spring, summer, and fall, actually. So those orange blocks, and lots of you have probably seen this list, but I thought I would just go more deeply into it, because I kind of went by this list, and I've planted a lot of these in my yard, and I have gotten to see so many wonderful bees on them. This is my new favorite plant, is Zizia, Golden Alexander, and it's an early bloomer, so it's supporting the queens, and it also just is easy to grow, takes over, and I think it's beautiful. Other early bloomers, I'm focusing more on the early bloomers because there aren't that many. There aren't as many. So you have to sort of think about making sure you have enough plants that bloom early in the spring. Penstemon digitalis on the left. A friend of mine took this picture, and I don't even know what bee that is, but he's like, he's amazing looking. And then this is a minor bee that was on a eastern lupine in my yard last year. And then I thought milkweed, I would talk about milkweed. Milkweed gets all the attention, but for our Pollinator Pathway newsletter that we were working on, one of the contributors from Croton-on-Hudson, New York, wanted to write an article about milkweed, and I thought, yeah, okay, but like, I think I know everything about milkweed. And then I read her article, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know anything about milkweed. And it turns out that so the butterfly weed, the orange milkweed on the left, is important for monarchs. They don't particularly like to lay their eggs on the leaves. They can, and they do, but they don't. It's not their favorite. But it's a really important plant for a huge, diverse array of bees. So it's an important bee plant. And then on the right is a picture of swamp milkweed that I planted in my yard from seed. I just took up an area of grass and just put down swamp milkweed 2 years ago. And it's just so easy, and it's been really successful. And it seems that the caterpillars like the young ones. So the fact that it's been reseeding, I've been taking a little more lawn away every year to let the seeds take root. And I just saw a baby caterpillar yesterday. So I'm pretty happy. So this was part of Carolyn's article, and I just thought I would show it because it does give you a sense of the diversity of different milkweeds, and that they actually have different purposes or different strengths. So, and then bee balm and mountain mint, I wanted to mention because they both, deer don't like them. So a lot of the times I get questions about how to keep deer from eating perennials. And one thing I always say is to plant these two plants, and they support pollinators in the summer. And then in the autumn, these are the basics, but they're so beautiful and so important. There's probably not one single plant that is more important for pollinators than Canada goldenrod or the goldenrods. Just really crucial, and they get a bad rap. People think that they cause allergies, but they actually don't. That's ragweed, so they don't usually create that problem. I love the small fall sneezeweed, which I think does like a wetter area, but it's such a beautiful plant. And the New England aster. So planting for specialists, we've touched on. I wanted to just, if I have time, am I doing okay on time? I want to talk about the evening primrose, because this is a plant that is a perfect example of some of the problems that come up when you're creating a yard for wildlife. I had a bunch of this evening primrose growing in an area where I'd put in meadow flowers, and I thought, what is this gigantic, like some of them seemed like they were 8 feet tall, scraggly looking thing. I'm gonna get rid of this. And then I looked it up on GoBotany. What is this plant? And I saw that it was a native wildflower. So I thought, I should leave it. It's probably important. It's here. It's a volunteer. And then I'd drive in, I'd park, I'd look at it, and I thought, it just looks terrible. So I came down, I have my loppers. I'm about to chop this thing, some of them down. And I look, and this incredibly pink moth with green eyes is in one of the flowers. So I thought, oh my gosh, what is this creature? And I actually took a picture of it and sent it to iNaturalist. And if you've never done that, it's a cool thing to do. And they identified it as an evening primrose moth. And it turns out that so the evening primrose opens at night and it closes during the day, and the moth comes and feeds at night when it's open. And what the male will do is during the day when the flower is closing, he'll stay in there, and you can see that his wings are like yellowish on the end, so he's completely camouflaged with the yellow flower. Also, that pink is present in the color of the stem, and the older leaves become that pink, so he's totally camouflaged. But he's in there, and then the sun goes down and the flower opens, and the female's coming and looking for nectar, and the flower opens and there he is. So it's like the greatest story. And it represents a lot of what's fun about this adventure of trying to draw these creatures to your yard, and what can be challenging. In the end, I did cut back a little bit of the evening primrose after checking to make sure there are no moths on it. And I have a sign. I have the Pollinator Pathway sign there that lets people know, this is habitat, and there's a reason why it's a little messier looking. But anyway, that is that story. And so when you're shopping for plants for pollinators, one question that comes up is, should you always buy straight natives, or is it okay to get cultivars? And I think basically the answer is it depends on the plant, and we kind of don't know. So there are studies going on at UConn, at Mount Cuba, that they're actually working with Doug Ptolemy there. And at the University of Vermont, there's a woman there working on this issue, and they're gathering lots of information on it. But we know a few things, and one is that cultivars that are grown from cuttings, they're actually clones. So planting those, so there's like there's a type of red maple that was in the study at Mount Cuba that is a cultivar, and it's made from cuttings. So that's not going to be good for biodiversity because these are clones. So that's a given. Things that are made from cuttings are not going to be helping us in our goal of restoring habitat. And then hybrids with double blossoms and different leaf color have been shown. I think maybe it's the I'm going to space out on what I'm trying to think of. The spring tree. This is when you need a room full of people to help you remember what you're trying to talk about. The red bud with the darker leaves, or the redder leaves, has been shown to not support as many insects. So the leaf color and the blossoms are something to look for. So there have been some cultivars that have attracted more insects. There's a high bush blueberry with bigger berries that's in one of the studies from Mount Cuba, and that it attracted more. So it's not a set, it's a complicated answer to this. Deer resistant nativars and some of disease resistant nativars, are a good thing, obviously, because of the work in the cultivar area. We may end up having the American elm and the chestnut come back. So it's complicated, but I would say, if in doubt, when you're shopping, and you're choosing between a straight native and a cultivar, I would go with the straight native unless you've done your homework. And then I saw this, which I thought was helpful, how to spot a cultivar. And most of you probably know this, but they have names that don't sound botanical. So like Cheyenne Spirit Coneflower. And so if you see a name like that, you'll know that Blue Heaven, you'll know it's probably a cultivar. And so where can you get organic straight native plants? There is a page on the website with a longer list, and places in New York and places in other areas. But top of the list is Earth Tones in Woodbury, if you haven't been up there. They have been hand collecting wild seed in this area for 25 years. They are so knowledgeable, and it's just the most fun place to go walk through and look at this gorgeous wetlands and open sunny areas and shady areas. So it's a treat. And then Native in Fairfield, I think opened like 1 or 2 years ago, and that's a great option. Gilberti's Copia in South Salem, and then there's some online options. So we can get native plants. I think it's also important to go to the nursery or the market where you buy plants normally and ask for native plants. Ask for organic, if possible, native plants or pesticide-free native plants, because we really want providers to know that there is a market for these plants. I'm just going to take one more second, I think I'm doing okay, to talk about a really exciting new project that is sort of an offshoot of the pollinator pathway. The Ecotype project. It is a group of, it's a group of partners, the Connecticut Native Plant Working Group, the Agricultural Experiment Station, Connecticut NOFA, and then a bunch of farms and the pollinator pathway. And the idea is that a lot of times when we order seed and when we order native plants online, they come from a couple places, the Midwest or like Tennessee. So you might have noticed like Prairie Moon and American Meadows. If you've ordered from those places, they're all in the Midwest. So some botanists have been wondering, what are we doing? We're bringing from other ecoregions. We're bringing plants in, and how is that affecting our natural landscape? So this happened in Maine. They were asking those questions, and there was no resource for local native seeds in Maine, and the Wild Seed Project was started for that reason. So botanists there have been collecting wild seed and propagating them, and have created this amazing resource. So we're trying to do that in Connecticut, and we're working with Highstead in Reading, and the Hickories Farm in Ridgefield. Dina Brewster there, if any of you guys know her, she's head of Connecticut Northeast Organic Farm Association now. So they're working together. Jordy Elkins at Highstead is collecting the seed, and a couple of other people. And then Planter's Choice Nursery and some organic farms are growing them and creating what we're calling living seed banks. So look for these. Planter's Choice is growing them, and they're a wholesaler. So if you go to the place where you normally buy plants, you can say, could you check with Planter's Choice and see if you can get Ecotype project plants? It's just a really cool new project. I'm happy to answer questions about it. I don't know if that was clear. There's a lot going on with it. So winding up, what else do they need? Nectar and pollen from native plants, larval host plants, trees, milkweed, evening primrose, a little bit of fresh water. I have like a divot in some stone steps on my patio, and I just keep some rainwater from my rain barrel, and I just always put water in there. So it can be anything easy like that, especially now, this time of year when it's so dry. Dirt patches for ground nesting bees. 80% of our native bees are ground nesters. They're solitary nesters. They don't sting. They don't have a colony to defend. So they don't have a need to sting, but they do need a little bit of bare earth. So if you have everything neatly covered with mulch and grass and everything, there's no nesting space for them. Leaves, important to leave the leaves over the winter. So many pollinators overwinter in the leaf matter. So if you can just wait until it warms up in the spring and until they've hatched and come out before you rake away your leaves. Or rake them to the beds or to the edges of your yard and then leave them there for the winter. And snags and old wood as nesting habitat, reeds for miner bees, and arrange within to find a mate. And as climate changes, this is the whole purpose of the pollinator pathway. We want to create these corridors so that pollinators can move when they need to. And then we've just added this recently, but I've been reading more and more about how harmful artificial lights are, night lights at night for moths and especially fireflies. So if you do have outdoor lights, having them be on a motion detector, and if there's security lights, and just having them come on when is needed is one solution. We got a question at the Pollinator Pathway Steering Committee from someone asking what color light is best for, not attracting insects. And I started researching it, and it's so interesting. It turns out the last week in July is National Moth Week. So we're going to do a newsletter focused on moths, and I will have lots more information about moths. Then it does seem like yellow lights are less attractive to, if you need to have a light out there, a yellow one is the best way to go. If you aren't familiar with Doug Ptolemy's work and his books, his new book, Nature's Best Hope, I'm just reading now, his ideas are what a lot of this is based on, and he's just so great. So I wanted to put that there, and then I wanted to see if there are any questions.
Louise, would you like me to read them to you?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Emma would like to know, how has COVID affected pollinator pathway work, and what are some benefits for bird species as well from creating pathways?
Okay, two great questions. The bird one I'll answer first. That really is Doug Ptolemy's purpose, if you guys have, or his focus, if you've heard him speak or read any of his books. And he did a study. So birds need caterpillars. Baby birds need caterpillars. So when you are supporting the butterflies and the moths, you are also feeding baby birds. Like, he did a study with chickadees, chickadee nest, and he had his grad students watching, how many caterpillars brought back, and it was just like some unbelievable number of caterpillars per chickadee. So in order for them to grow up, they need this, caterpillars are really high in protein, and they're soft, and the baby birds can eat them. So that's that question. Also, a lot of the native plants also have the berries. They've evolved with the birds as well, obviously, and they provide food and habitat for our native birds as well. And then COVID that's such a good question. One of the ways is Zoom conferences. We've had to learn how to do this. At first, we just had canceled all the talks all over the place, and I'm so worried about losing momentum. But one thing that's happened is people are in their yards, and they're looking around, and they're thinking, maybe I should do something here to attract birds, to attract pollinators. So we've had an increase in the number of people contacting us to get signs, to join the pollinator pathway, to find out how to set one up in their town. So that's good. And then on a local level, I work in a bunch of the watershed towns, Norwalk, especially. I live in Norwalk. We have ongoing projects, and we used to do sort of bigger volunteer events. We would get maybe grant funding, and we would be putting in some trees or some shrubs, and we would try to have 50 volunteers come. So obviously we're not doing any of that this year. And what we've done is smaller groups of volunteers. So we've been doing 3 to 5, and I think we may now go to maybe 6 or 7, outside, wearing masks, socially distanced. And we've been in 2 places. We're doing it every Saturday. So I thought maybe that would be too much for people, but it's sort of created, it's kind of fun. It's been social, and people come when they can. So that's one way we've adapted. I would love to hear from other people how you're adapting to COVID. So that's something I'm interested in hearing more about.
Kathy would like to know if there's a Norwalk pollinator pathway, and presumably how she can get in touch.
Yes, absolutely. There's a Facebook page, Norwalk Pollinator Pathway. You can also email me at info@norwalkriver.org, and I can connect you. And we're doing tons of stuff in Norwalk, so definitely want to hear from you.
Great. And Sarah would like to know the following. She says, I follow Pollinator Friendly Yards on Facebook. There was a recent post where, in Georgia, they reported potential pesticide drift. The Georgia Department of Ag came out and tested, and they did indeed have pesticide drift. Apparently, if there are a number of complaints, the company or sprayer will be fined. Is there something similar here in Connecticut?
Wow. I don't know if I haven't heard about I know that the focus, if you talk to the entomologists at the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station, their focus is drift all the time. That is a huge problem, but I don't I don't know if there's anything set up here. I would say we should call the Agricultural Experiment Station and ask that question, and also call Connecticut DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. They have I mean, maybe the way to start is DEEP has a program where you can ask to be alerted ahead of time. You guys probably already know this. If you have neighbors that are going to be spraying, so they have to let you know that they're going to be coming and spraying, and then I think you're allowed to find out what they're spraying. So, but the drift thing is really interesting. I'm going to write that down, and I'd love to know more about what happened. If you want to email me at info@norwalkriver.org, I think that's something that would be good to find out more about. Thanks for that question.
Kathy says, I'm a beginner. What can I buy to put in a container outside of my apartment?
Okay, great question. We have been figuring out about the containers and what works and doesn't work. And so I have a lot of information, which I can email it to you. If you email me, I'll send you the list. I'm about to post it on the website. A lot of the perennials have been coming back, and I know that the people that were making them in Ridgefield were also adding some annuals, like some zinnias for color. But just doing so what we've done in Ridgefield is 3 plants for each of the bloom times, and I would use that list that I put up there. So 3 of those plants for spring, 3 for summer, and 3 for fall, or depending on how big your thing is, 1 of each, and then maybe a couple of annuals. And then they put in, I think they put in a baby cedar at Christmas time, and just made it year round. So I have more information. I was going to make a slide. I should have made that slide, but if you email me, I'll send you a plant list for that.
Okay, wonderful. And Beth wants to know if anyone is working on a pathway on Long Island.
That is such a good question. What has happened is the pollinator pathway started in Wilton, but it was part of the Hudson to Housatonic Regional Conservation Partnership group. So that has Westchester, Putnam, and part of Dutchess County and Fairfield County. So it's really been happening in that area, and it's gone all the way up the Hudson. But I don't know of any. I don't think so. I'd have to double check the list, but I don't know yet, but we need that. So
maybe this is a follow-up question, and I'm actually curious too. If you're in a town that doesn't have one, how do you start one? Do you just email you and get like
yeah. Email me or email info@pollinator-pathway.org. I have another talk that's about how to start one in your town, and I can even just send you my PowerPoint for that. But the first step is we have a giant database of people who have shown interest, and people who are leaders in towns, or people who want to find other people in their town. And so we would connect you with whoever's in your town or in your neighboring town that are doing it. And if there's not anybody, we'll send you our toolkit, which is also downloadable from the website. And it has all the starting information and the steps. And I can also, you can call me and I'll talk you through it, because that's a lot of the time. That's how people get started. We just talk on the phone.
Wonderful. Well, that's it for questions, unless anyone else has any more they want to quickly type in. Louise's contact info is up here on the slide. Make sure you follow on Facebook, all the different groups we mentioned. Do you have anything else, Louise? Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you, everybody. I'm so, it makes me so happy that people are interested in doing this. It's been a life-changing experience for me being part of this group, and it's been great trying to connect land, but it's really been about connecting with people, other people that are trying to work on these same issues. And this has been just a platform for people to come together and try to make change. So being here is part of that, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'm going to unshare. Is that good?
Yeah. Okay, I'll start my video.